The gavel hit the bench with a thunderous crack, but it wasn't the judge who silenced the entire courtroom. It was Victoria Sterling's voice cutting through the air like a blade as she stood in her designer suit, pointing directly at Sarah Martinez. "Your Honor, this woman has no business representing anyone in a court of law. Look at her cheap outfit, her discount briefcase. She's clearly from the wrong side of town and has no understanding of real legal practice." The humiliation burned across Sarah's cheeks as every eye in the packed courtroom turned to stare. What Victoria didn't know was that the man sitting quietly in the gallery, the one she'd dismissed as just another spectator, held the power to destroy her career with a single phone call. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. If you've ever been judged for not having enough money or felt invisible in a room full of powerful people, this story will remind you that appearances can be devastatingly deceiving. 3 months earlier, Sarah Martinez had been working double shifts at a diner just to pay for law school. Her hands were permanently stained with coffee and her back ached from carrying heavy trays, but every tip brought her one step closer to her dream. She'd grown up in East Oakland, raised by a single mother who cleaned office buildings at night to keep food on the table. Law school wasn't just an education for Sarah, it was her ticket to a different life. The acceptance letter to the public defender's office had arrived on a Tuesday morning, crumpled from being shoved through the broken mail slot of her studio apartment. Sarah had read it 3 times before the words sank in. She'd made it. After years of studying in the diner's back booth during her breaks, after countless nights with textbooks spread across her tiny kitchen table, she was finally going to be a real lawyer. Her first case assignment came with a warning from her supervisor, Margaret Chen. "Sarah, I'm giving you the Henderson family custody battle. It's going to be tough because you'll be up against Sterling, Walsh Associates." Victoria Sterling specifically requested this case, which means she sees an easy win. Margaret's expression was grim as she handed over the thick file. Victoria has a reputation for being ruthless, especially with new attorneys. Don't take anything she says personally. Sarah spent the next 2 weeks preparing like her life depended on it. The Henderson case involved Maria Henderson, a housekeeper fighting to regain custody of her 8-year-old daughter after her ex-husband claimed she was unfit due to her low income. Sarah saw her own mother in Maria's tired eyes, remembered the fear of not having, the shame of second-hand clothes and empty refrigerators. The morning of the hearing, Sarah stood in front of her bathroom mirror trying to make her 3-year-old suit look professional. She'd bought it at a thrift store for her law school interviews, and it showed its age in the slightly faded fabric and loose threads. Her briefcase was a graduation gift from her mother, purchased from a discount store but carried with pride. Sarah knew she didn't look like the polished attorneys she'd seen in movies, but she also knew she'd worked harder than any of them to earn her place in that courtroom. The courthouse was an intimidating building of marble and brass, with footsteps echoing off the high ceilings like gunshots. Sarah arrived early, wanting to familiarize herself with the layout and calm her nerves. She found the assigned courtroom and sat in the gallery, reviewing her notes one final time. The legal arguments were solid, her preparation thorough, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to walk into a lion's den. That's when she first saw Victoria Sterling. The woman swept into the courtroom like she owned it, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, her navy suit clearly custom-tailored. Diamond earrings caught the light as she moved, and her leather briefcase probably cost more than Sarah's rent. Everything about Victoria screamed money and power, from her manicured nails to her designer heels that clicked authoritatively against the floor. Victoria's team followed behind her like a parade of privilege. 2 junior associates in matching expensive suits, an older partner with silver hair and a Rolex that gleamed on his wrist, and a paralegal who looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. They arranged themselves at their table with practiced efficiency, spreading out documents and tablets with the confidence of people who'd never doubted their right to be there. Sarah watched this display of legal theater and felt her stomach drop. Her opponent wasn't just a lawyer, she was a force of nature backed by unlimited resources and decades of connections. The Henderson family's modest retainers suddenly seemed laughably inadequate compared to the army of legal firepower arrayed against them. When Maria Henderson arrived with her daughter, Sarah felt her resolve strengthen. The little girl clung to her mother's hand, her dark eyes wide with confusion about why she couldn't go home. Maria wore her best dress, a simple blue number that she'd probably saved for church, and her work-roughened hands shook slightly as she greeted Sarah. This wasn't about lawyer versus lawyer anymore. This was about a mother fighting for her child against a system that judged her worth by her bank account. The hearing began routinely enough. Judge Patricia Coleman, a stern woman in her 60s, called the court to order and outlined the custody dispute. Sarah felt confident as she began her opening statement, explaining how Maria Henderson worked 2 jobs to provide for her daughter, how she'd maintained stable housing and excellent school attendance records. The facts were on their side. Victoria Sterling's opening was a masterclass in character assassination. She painted Maria as irresponsible and unstable, highlighting every late rent payment, every missed parent-teacher conference due to work conflicts. But it was her tone that cut the deepest, a condescending delivery that made poverty sound like a moral failing rather than a circumstance. "Your Honor," Victoria said, her voice carrying easily through the courtroom, "we cannot ignore the basic facts. Miss Henderson works as a housekeeper and waitress. She lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in a questionable neighborhood. She has no college education, no substantial savings, no family support system. Is this really the environment we want to place a vulnerable child in?" Sarah stood to object, her heart pounding. "Your Honor, my client's economic status has no bearing on her fitness as a mother. She has provided a loving, stable home." Victoria's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Stable? Your Honor, look at counsel's own appearance. She's clearly from the same economic background as her client. How can someone who shops at discount stores and can't afford professional attire properly represent anyone in this courtroom?" The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She felt heat rise in her cheeks as the courtroom fell silent.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Even Judge Coleman looked uncomfortable, but she didn't intervene. Victoria continued her attack with surgical precision, each word designed to humiliate and diminish. "I mean, really, Your Honor, that briefcase looks like it came from a garage sale. Those shoes have seen better days. If Miss Martinez cannot present herself professionally, how can we trust her to present a competent case? This is exactly the kind of unprofessional representation that gives our legal system a bad name." Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped her notes. Every insecurity she'd ever felt about not belonging, about not having enough money to fit in, came rushing back. She was 26 years old, standing in her first real courtroom, being systematically destroyed by someone who had probably never worried about paying rent or choosing between groceries and textbooks. Victoria wasn't finished. She turned to address the gallery, where several other attorneys had gathered to watch the proceedings. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when we lower our standards. When we allow people who clearly don't understand professional norms to practice law. Miss Martinez's client deserves better representation, just as this court deserves better advocates." The humiliation was complete. Sarah felt small and insignificant, like the scholarship kid who'd wandered into the wrong classroom. She looked at Maria Henderson, who was staring at her with growing concern, probably wondering if her lawyer was competent enough to help her keep her daughter. The weight of that responsibility, combined with her public shaming, nearly broke her resolve entirely. But something in Maria's eyes stopped Sarah from backing down. It was the same look her own mother had worn during the hardest times, a mixture of fear and fierce determination. Sarah straightened her shoulders and found her voice, even though it shook with emotion. "Your Honor, I may not have expensive clothes or the finest briefcase, but I have something more important. I have an understanding of what it's like to struggle, to work multiple jobs just to survive, to be judged unfairly because of circumstances beyond my control. That understanding makes me a better advocate for my client, not a worse one." Victoria's smile was predatory. "How touching. But Your Honor, we're not running a charity here. This is a court of law, and it requires professional standards. Miss Martinez's background might make for a heartwarming story, but it doesn't qualify her to handle complex legal matters." The attack continued for what felt like hours. Victoria questioned every piece of evidence Sarah presented, made snide comments about her legal education, even criticized the way she pronounced certain legal terms. It was a systematic demolition designed not just to win the case, but to destroy Sarah's confidence and credibility as an attorney. During the lunch recess, Sarah sat alone in the courthouse cafeteria, picking at a sandwich she couldn't taste. Her reflection in the window showed a young woman who looked defeated, her cheap suit wrinkled from stress, her hair escaping from the professional bun she'd attempted that morning. She thought about calling Margaret and asking to be removed from the case, about admitting that Victoria was right and she didn't belong in this world. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Midja, remember who you are and why you're fighting. Some people try to make you small so they can feel big. Don't let them." Sarah smiled despite everything. Her mother had always known exactly what to say. When court resumed,
Victoria's assault intensified. She'd clearly decided that humiliating Sarah was as important as winning the custody case, perhaps more so. Every objection Sarah made was met with a condescending comment about her inexperience. Every piece of evidence she presented was dismissed with remarks about her inability to understand real legal practice. Your Honor, Victoria said during her closing argument, we've seen today what happens when unqualified individuals are allowed to practice law. Ms. Martinez's performance has been a disservice, not only to her client, but to this entire judicial system. I move that this court consider whether someone of her obvious limitations should be allowed to continue practicing before this bench. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Victoria wasn't just trying to win the case, she was trying to end Sarah's career before it had even begun. The gallery was packed with other attorneys, now drawn by word of the spectacle. Some looked sympathetic, but others seemed entertained by the demolition of a young lawyer's dignity. Judge Coleman finally intervened. Miss Sterling, please limit your remarks to the case at hand. But the damage was done. Sarah's reputation was in ruins, her confidence shattered. She delivered her closing argument, in a voice barely above a whisper, knowing that no matter how strong her legal arguments were, the jury of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. As the hearing concluded with Judge Coleman taking the matter under advisement, Victoria gathered her expensive materials with obvious satisfaction. She'd won more than just a legal victory, she'd established her dominance over a young attorney who dared to challenge her. The message was clear: know your place, and if you don't belong, we'll make sure you remember it. Sarah packed her discount briefcase with trembling hands, acutely aware of every whispered conversation in the gallery. She felt like an imposter who'd been exposed, a fraud who'd fooled herself into thinking she could compete in this world of privilege and power. Maria Henderson approached her with tears in her eyes, not knowing whether to thank her lawyer or apologize for being the cause of her humiliation. That's when Sarah noticed him for the first time. A man in his 40s sitting quietly in the back row, wearing a simple dark suit that somehow looked more expensive than Victoria's entire ensemble. He'd been there for most of the hearing, taking occasional notes in a leather portfolio, his attention focused intently on the proceedings. Unlike the other spectators who seemed entertained by the drama, his expression was serious, almost angry. Their eyes met briefly as Sarah gathered her things, and she saw something unexpected in his gaze. Not pity, not amusement, but a cold fury that seemed directed not at her but at everything that had just transpired. He stood as she passed, a respectful nod that felt oddly out of place after the afternoon of systematic humiliation she'd endured. Sarah left the courthouse feeling like her world had collapsed. The parking meter had expired, adding a $25 ticket to her growing pile of problems. Her car, a 15-year-old Honda with a rattling engine, seemed to mock her pretensions of professional success. She sat behind the wheel for several minutes, too emotionally drained to start the engine. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Word of the courtroom humiliation had already spread through legal circles, shared with the kind of vicious glee that people reserve for watching someone fail spectacularly. Social media was beginning to pick up the story, with hashtags about professional standards and knowing your place. Victoria Sterling had achieved her goal completely. But as Sarah finally started her car and pulled into traffic, she had no idea that the quiet man from the courtroom gallery was making a phone call that would change everything. She didn't know that her humiliation had been witnessed by someone with the power to turn Victoria Sterling's moment of triumph into her greatest nightmare. The wheels of justice, it seemed, were about to take an unexpected turn. The phone call lasted exactly 47 seconds. Michael Chen sat in his Bentley outside the courthouse, his voice calm but deadly as he spoke to his executive assistant. Cancel all of Sterling Walsh Associates contracts immediately. Every single one. I want their retainer agreements terminated by end of business today. He paused, watching Sarah Martinez struggle with her broken car door in the parking lot. And schedule an emergency meeting with the managing partners. Tell them Michael Chen wants to discuss their employment practices. 3 hours later, Victoria Sterling was celebrating her courtroom victory at an exclusive downtown restaurant when her phone began buzzing incessantly. The first call was from her managing partner, his voice tight with panic. Victoria, we need to talk, now. Get back to the office immediately. The second call was from the senior associate handling their biggest client account. Victoria, Chen Industries just terminated their contract. No explanation. They're demanding immediate return of all files. By the time Victoria arrived at the Sterling, Walsh & Associates offices, the 32nd floor was in complete chaos. Phones rang constantly. Junior associates rushed between offices with stacks of documents, and the managing partners were locked in the conference room with expressions that could have frozen hell. Victoria's assistant intercepted her at the elevator, her face pale with worry. "Miss Sterling, Mr. Walsh wants to see you immediately. We've lost 4 major clients in the past 2 hours. Chen Industries, Morrison Development, Pacific Holdings and Westbridge Investments. They're all demanding document return and threatening legal action if we don't comply by tomorrow morning." The assistant's voice cracked slightly. "The partners are saying someone's targeting the firm specifically." Victoria felt her stomach drop, but she maintained her composure as she walked toward the conference room. Inside, the 3 managing partners sat around the mahogany table like judges at a tribunal. Robert Walsh, the firm's founding partner, looked up as she entered, his usually friendly demeanor replaced by cold professionalism. "Sit down, Victoria. We need to discuss what happened in court today." His voice carried a tone she'd never heard before, one that made her expensive suit feel suddenly inadequate. "Tell me about the Henderson custody case, every detail." Victoria recounted the hearing with growing confidence, describing how she'd systematically dismantled the opposition's case and exposed the inexperienced public defender's incompetence. She painted herself as the hero of professional standards, defending the integrity of their legal system against unqualified pretenders. The partners listened in stone-faced silence. "So you publicly humiliated a young attorney based on her appearance and economic background?" The question came from Margaret Sterling, no relation despite the surety who served as the firm's ethics partner. "You questioned her right to practice law because of her clothing and briefcase." Victoria's confidence wavered slightly. "I was establishing the disparity in professional qualifications. The court has a right to expect certain standards from its officers." She straightened in her chair, drawing on years of courtroom authority. "Surely you understand the importance of maintaining our profession's dignity." Robert Walsh placed a folder on the table, his movements deliberate and ominous. "Victoria, I want you to look at these termination letters. Read them carefully." He slid the documents across the polished surface. Every single one mentions today's courtroom incident specifically. "Apparently someone was watching your performance very closely." Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she read the formal language of contract termination. Each letter cited concerns about the firm's commitment to ethical practice and professional conduct. The Chen Industries letter was particularly damning, referencing unconscionable behavior toward opposing counsel and failure to maintain professional standards of respect and dignity. "I don't understand." Victoria's voice was smaller now, the courtroom bravado evaporating like morning mist. "Who could have this kind of influence? Who would care about some nobody public defender?" The conference room door opened and Victoria's assistant entered with obvious reluctance. "Mr. Walsh, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says it's regarding Miss Sterling's conduct in court today." She paused, swallowing hard. "It's Michael Chen from Chen Industries." The name hit Victoria like a physical blow. Michael Chen wasn't just any business executive, he was one of the most powerful men in the city. Chen Industries owned everything from tech companies to real estate developments, and his personal net worth was estimated in the billions. More importantly, he was known for his philanthropy and support of legal aid organizations. Robert Walsh's face went ashen. "Send him in immediately." He turned to Victoria with barely contained fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Chen Industries represents 30% of our annual revenue. If we lose them completely..." Michael Chen entered the conference room with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to power. He was younger than Victoria had expected, perhaps mid-40s, with intelligent dark eyes and an understated elegance that made her designer outfit seem gaudy by comparison. He nodded politely to the partners before his gaze settled on Victoria with unmistakable coldness. "Gentlemen, Miss Sterling." His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath that made everyone in the room sit straighter. "I wanted to address today's incident personally before this matter escalates further." He remained standing, a subtle power play that put everyone else at a disadvantage. "I witnessed Miss Sterling's conduct in Judge Coleman's courtroom this afternoon." Victoria tried to maintain her composure, but something in Michael's presence made her feel exposed and vulnerable. "Mr. Chen, I was simply maintaining professional standards." The opposing counsel was clearly inexperienced and inappropriate for such proceedings. Michael's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Miss Sterling, the young attorney you attacked today works for the public defender's office, representing clients who cannot afford private counsel. She graduated summa cum laude from Stanford Law School, where she was editor of the Law Review. His voice remained perfectly level. She took that position not because she lacked other options, but because she believes in justice for everyone, not just those who can afford it. The revelation hit Victoria like a slap. Stanford Law School, summa cum laude, Law Review editor. Sarah Martinez wasn't the incompetent nobody Victoria had painted her as. She was a brilliant attorney who had chosen public service over private profit. Victoria's attack hadn't just been cruel, it had been based on completely false assumptions. Furthermore, Michael continued, "Miss Martinez is my wife. We've been married for 2 years." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face as the implications crashed over her like a tsunami. She insisted on keeping her maiden name and maintaining her career independently without trading on my connections or wealth. She wanted to succeed or fail based on her own merit. Robert Walsh looked like he was having a heart attack. Margaret Sterling had gone completely white. The other partners stared at Victoria as if she had just confessed to multiple felonies. Victoria herself felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath her chair, leaving her falling through empty space. "Your wife?" Victoria's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Sarah Martinez is your wife." The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. The quiet man in the gallery, the one who had watched her systematic humiliation of Sarah with growing anger. The phone call he'd made immediately after court. The sudden termination of contracts. Michael nodded slowly. "Sarah doesn't know I was there today. She doesn't know about the contracts being terminated. She insisted that we keep our marriage private specifically to avoid situations like this, where people might treat her differently because of her connection to me." His voice grew colder. "She wanted to be judged on her own merit, something Miss Sterling apparently found impossible to do." Victoria tried to speak, to explain, to somehow undo the catastrophic mistake she'd made, but no words came. She had publicly humiliated the wife of one of the most powerful men in the city, attacked her for being poor when she was married to a billionaire, questioned her qualifications when she was more academically accomplished than Victoria herself. Chen Robert Walsh's voice shook slightly. "Please understand that Miss Sterling's actions don't represent the values of this firm. We had no knowledge of your wife's identity, and we certainly don't condone personal attacks on opposing counsel." He shot Victoria a look that could have melted steel. "We take full responsibility for our employees' conduct." Michael's smile was thin and completely humorless. "I appreciate that, Mr. Walsh. However, this incident has caused me to reevaluate whether Sterling, Walsh Associates shares my commitment to professional integrity and respect for all members of the legal community." He placed a business card on the table. "I'll be announcing the establishment of the Martinez Legal Justice Foundation tomorrow. It will provide resources and support for young attorneys from disadvantaged backgrounds." The foundation would be a direct rebuke to everything Victoria had said in court, a statement that economic background had no bearing on legal competence or professional worth. Worse, it would be a permanent reminder of her cruelty, her name forever associated with the kind of elitist attitude the foundation was created to combat. As for Sterling, Walsh Associates, Michael continued, "I'll be recommending to my business associates that they reconsider their relationships with firms that tolerate discriminatory behavior." He turned to look directly at Victoria. "I believe in consequences for actions, Miss Sterling. Today you chose to judge my wife based on her clothes and her clients rather than her character and competence. Now you'll discover what it feels like to be judged." After Michael left, the conference room erupted in barely controlled chaos. Robert Walsh's face was purple with rage as he turned on Victoria. "Do you have any idea what you've cost this firm? Chen Industries was our anchor client. Without them we'll lose at least 6 other major accounts." His voice rose with each word. "Your personal vendetta against some young lawyer has potentially destroyed everything we've built." Margaret Sterling was already drafting damage control strategies, but they all knew it was too late. Word would spread through the legal community like wildfire. Victoria Sterling, the attorney who had publicly humiliated the wife of Michael Chen, the lawyer who had let her prejudices and cruelty destroy one of the city's most prestigious firms. "Victoria, clear out your office." Robert Walsh's voice was deadly quiet now. "Your partnership is terminated effective immediately. We'll be conducting a full review of all your cases for potential ethical violations." He stood up, signaling the end of her career at the firm she'd helped build. "And Victoria, don't expect references." As Victoria sat alone in the conference room, the magnitude of her fall became clear. In the span of 6 hours, she had gone from celebrating a courtroom victory to losing her job, her reputation, and her future, all because she had chosen to judge someone based on their appearance rather than their character. Meanwhile, Sarah Martinez sat in her small apartment, still unaware of the earthquake that had shaken the legal community. She was reviewing case files for tomorrow's hearings, determined not to let Victoria's attack derail her commitment to her clients. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "How was court today? Sorry I couldn't make it to dinner. Big day at the office." Sarah smiled and texted back, "Rough day but I'm handling it. Love you." She had no idea that her husband had just rearranged the city's legal landscape in her defense, or that Victoria Sterling was at that moment packing her office in disgrace. She only knew that she had work to do and clients who depended on her. The next morning, the legal community woke up to news that sent shockwaves through every law firm in the city. The Martinez Legal Justice Foundation had been announced with an initial endowment of $50 million. Victoria Sterling had been terminated from Sterling, Walsh Associates, and Michael Chen had personally blacklisted any firm that tolerated discriminatory behavior toward opposing counsel. Victoria found herself unemployable at any major firm. The story of her courtroom attack on Sarah Martinez spread through social media and legal publications, becoming a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudice and professional arrogance. The woman who had once commanded respect through fear now found herself isolated and scorned. Sarah Martinez, meanwhile, was promoted to senior public defender within months. The Martinez Foundation provided her office with resources that allowed them to take on cases previously impossible to handle. She never learned the full extent of her husband's intervention, believing her success came from her own hard work and dedication. Victoria Sterling's fall from grace was complete and irreversible. She had learned too late that power based on cruelty is ultimately powerless, and that sometimes the person you dismiss as insignificant can change your entire world. In trying to destroy someone she saw as beneath her, Victoria had destroyed herself instead. The courthouse where it all began now displayed a plaque honoring the Martinez Legal Justice Foundation's commitment to equal representation, and somewhere in the city, a young public defender continued fighting for justice, never knowing that her quiet strength had toppled one of the legal community's most feared bullies. Justice, as it turned out, had its own way of keeping score. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.